Who do you guys think we are going to pick as our CFP champions, and who's going to be the winner? Now, Khalid, I think you were the first one up. So we're going to go ahead and dip onto that side of the mountain. Well,
yes, I have Elon winning the national.
That's what I'm saying. Let's go, Elon. Like, bro, you just got to just be you, bro. Be you, bro. Just got to be you, bro. There you go. All right, so this is Khalid's 2 teams he feels like are going to be in the national championship.
Yeah, so Oregon and Georgia. Now, just a little side note, I had Georgia beating Penn State and Texas on their way here, and Oregon beating USC, Florida State, and Ohio State on the road here. And yeah, both the semifinal games were rematches of my picks for the Big Ten. Actually, no, not the Big Ten, for the SEC championship game. Forgot I had USC in there for the Big Ten, but arguably the 2 best teams from the Big Ten facing off in what was a rematch. I had Oregon getting the better of them this time, and yes, I do have Georgia beating Texas 3 times this season. I had Georgia beating Texas in the regular season. I had Georgia beating Texas in the SEC championship game, and in the semifinals of the playoffs. I know that's kind of crazy.
I don't know why I keep thinking Oklahoma is the opponent that Georgia's playing. I don't know why I keep thinking that.
Yeah, no, Oklahoma. I'm not too high on them this year. But I mean, this matchup is probably going to be one of the more difficult ones because these are 2 super talented rosters. It's really both teams' strengths match up with one another's. I mean, the first thing you think of with, at least that I think of with Georgia, is going to be their front lines, the offensive and defensive line, which, this defensive line of Georgia generally can't be stopped by many opposition offensive lines, but Oregon has 2 elite offensive tackles in Josh Connerly and a Johnny Cornelius. This is one of the few offensive lines in the country that can really hold their own against this Georgia front 7 to protect Dillon Gabriel and set up this passing offense. Again, Georgia stacked on defense. Malachi Starks back there on the back end, going to be holding things down, right? So, on that end, like Oregon's offense, in my opinion, is probably going to struggle because this Georgia defense is very, very stout. But then on the flip side, right? We don't really know what Georgia's passing game is going to look like without Brock Bowers, right? You have developing talent at wide receiver. If Rara Thomas isn't in legal trouble, right? Especially with Dominic Lovett, hopefully taking another step forward.
Yep.
The passing offense it'll be at least less focused on one guy, right? The targets should be more evenly distributed, at least in theory. But then the running game, right? That's another thing you think of with all those running backs, ETN and both Branson and Roderick Robinson. Like, again, an excellent running game, but Oregon's defense only allowed like 104 rushing yards per game last year, which I think was top 10 in the country. So they had an elite rushing defense. So it's strength on strength really across the board. And so in terms of matchups, man, it's a tough one.
I just had to throw it up.
That is true. If there's a couple suspensions here, this one could easily go for Oregon, right? But
they'll still play the next day. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, they'll just be suspended, next year for their 1 cupcake game. But for me, this matchup is going to come down to experience. I trust, as much as I love Dillon Gabriel and the talent that he is, I think as a quarterback in terms of pure talent, like what can they do, the throws, what can they make, and even like how dynamic are they in the running game. Gabriel has that edge over Beck, and in my opinion, it's not even close. But I do trust Beck to manage the game well. He's experienced in big games, and holistically, like, I love Dan Lanning. I love the guy. Great coach. But Kirby Smart is one of the few coaches in the country right now who I would trust to outcoach him as well. I think Georgia barely beats Oregon in a very close national championship game. Again, on paper, it's splitting hairs, right? But I got to give Georgia the edge because of their experience. I know that they lost to Alabama last year, but Georgia, I think as a whole, is going to I think they're going to have a slight edge over Oregon.
Ooh, man, I can't disagree with you with either one of these two. Now, spoiler alert on the chat: all of us have different national championship winners. You might see a couple of these teams the same, and like there are two, but all of us are different, which is great. But I can't disagree with you, man. I think the only person that was high on Carson Beck was Don, if I remember right. Let me go to the Heisman spreadsheet. Yeah, he has he was the only one that had Carson Beck and Jackson Dart in his Heisman 4. I mean, is what it is. Like, if Carson Beck puts it all together, we saw flashes from him last year. Some people just thought he played incredible last year. And I don't think that was the case. I think him and Quinn Ewers' years was so similar to me.
Yeah, no, you look at the numbers, like, I had this conversation with people I know. They're like, man, Quinn Ewers is so inconsistent, which isn't necessarily false. But then they're like, man, Carson Beck's so reliable, yada, yada. I'm like, man, if you look at the numbers, Carson Beck's highs may have been at times like right around where Quinn Ewers' highs were. But Beck had way lower lows last season. So if you want to talk about consistency, you can make a case for Quinn Ewers being more consistent this past year.
And he had the best weapon in the country on his team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that might be a hot take, but like, go crunch the numbers yourselves. Look at the individual games, because you'll see games where Beck really did nothing. Like Quinn Ewers threw at least one touchdown pass in every game he played, I believe. Beck, you can't say the same this past year. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, the numbers speak for themselves there. Again, I like Beck as a game manager. I don't think he's a game breaker. While I think Gabriel is, I think that Georgia defense will be able to neutralize him.
Yep. Yeah, I like this, man. And if this happens, this is literally on paper, to me, outside of Ohio State. These are I think Georgia, Oregon, and Ohio State are the 3 best teams on paper.
Yeah.
So if you have either one of those, I can't like holistically disagree with you and who that winner is going to be.
Right there with you, man.
So Torque has some. He has some.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Some predictions. He said Ohio State for Dante would be my winner. Bama for Sora would be his winner. Texas for Don. Don doesn't have a list this week. Oregon for Hayden. Ole Miss for Don is my guesses. Okay. Well, I think I'm the next one up on this. Yes, I am.
You got me, Torque. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
All right. So how it all worked out was Ohio State was my 5th seed and Oregon was my number 2 seed. Now I have 2 Big Ten teams on here. Ohio State's road was they had to beat Penn State, Virginia Tech, and Georgia, which those would be banger games to watch. I'm just letting you know right now.
Max.
Yeah, because you have Ohio State as 5th, so they would go. You said beat Penn State,
Big Ten,
number 4,
Virginia Tech, and then
the
Georgia.
number 4 seed. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And
yeah. I'm following.
And then Oregon would have to beat Iowa and Notre Dame on mine. I have Notre Dame going to the semifinals.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Which is weird. I don't, the way that the bracket worked out is how it worked out because Notre Dame had to play Kansas, then they had to play Utah, which I think both of them on any day those are going to be 2 close wins for Notre Dame to me. Then by the time they get to Oregon,
that could be a flip of the coin for either of those teams on both of those games.
Yeah. So when you look at it, Ohio State has a way tougher road than Oregon does going into my national championship, but that doesn't diminish anything that Oregon's going to do. Like they're deservedly so in my bracket to be the number 2 team for what they're going to do this year. Now, a couple things that I wanted to point out with Oregon. Oregon lost a bunch of important pieces. Bo Nix, Jackson Powers Johnson, Troy Franklin, Kyrie Jackson, Brandon Dorless, Evan Williams, Bucky Irvin, and Jamal Hill. So that was on both sides of the ball that they took a hit. And then you also go to their transfer portal. What Oregon lost in the transfer portal with names like, corner, Cole Martin that gained with players like Jabbar Muhammad to fill in his place. So those are, 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀 came from Washington, and they were just national champions, and he was a big part of the way that their defense was, right?
Yeah, he was
also,
elite.
Yeah, and then also they're beefing up their losses on offense too. Of course, we talked about Bo Nix, Bucky Irvin, Troy Franklin. They get a Evan Stewart. They get a Dillon Gabriel. They get a Dante Moore. They get a Matthew Bedford.
I'm right there with you, Khalif.
Yeah.
Who was a redshirt senior from Indiana. So he's going to be a beast on that offensive line. And I think right now Dan Lanning is putting the worst spot, putting a stamp on the worst spot on his team in the last couple of years, which has been his secondary. I don't care what anybody says. That's been a weak spot at Oregon. That's where they got tore up by Michael Penix Jr. every single year. Granted, Michael Penix Jr. had three, a bona fide first-round receiver, and then, two other guys that have been teetering on the brink of being the number one receiver on that team over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. They ranked 128th in passes per game allowed in 2023. Also, number 65 in passing yards allowed. For a team the caliber of them, those are crappy numbers. I'm going to just put it like that. Their sack percentage was 54 in the country. That has to deal a lot with how your secondary is performing too. Like, those are the two anchors of your defense. If you can get good pressure on the quarterback, it always helps your secondary. But if you can cover guys really well, it helps out your edge rushers. Like, it just is what it is. That's how they always play off each other. But here's where Dan Lanning is going to be a beast. He's got guys. He's got his true recruiting class that's going to step in now. A lot of those red shirt guys are going to come in and help. But I want you guys to listen to what he did in the transfer portal this year, because it was absolutely disgusting. He got Cam Alexander from UTSA. He got Jabbar Muhammad from Washington. Those are two corners that were the cornerstones of both of their defenses. They're going to anchor the outside. This is their combined stats. Between the both of them, they had 32 passes defended. They had 16 apiece. 82 solo tackles. They had 41 apiece. And 6 interceptions. They had 3 apiece. They had identical stats. So you're essentially getting the same corner by statistics coming on that team. They also get safety Kobe Savage from Kansas State, and he had 3 interceptions as a safety. That's more than half. If you put their stats together, that's more than half of the passes defended. Or half of the passes defended that they had as a defense last year, and half of the interception that Oregon had all last season just with those 3 guys. It's ridiculous. Like, whoever was crunching those numbers, like, we got some of them ones on the team right now. But I also wanted to highlight, and we've talked about this guy a lot, but I want people to understand the significance of having a Dillon Gabriel on your team, right? He brings experience. He brings the ability to turn over a playbook quickly. What I mean by that, he's been at UCF. He's been to Oklahoma, and now this is his 3rd place where he's learning a totally different playbook right now. That takes skill. It really does. I don't care if you transfer 5,000 places in your career. To be able to be a starter on all those teams and be able to perform really well in all those offenses, that's not a run-of-the-mill thing, man. So when Dan Lanning was looking for the next quarterback to come in for Oregon, you also had to think who was the best replacement for Bo Nix that you don't have to teach him anything different, and how similar of a player like Bo Nix that you can get. You can't tell me in the country that a guy that is the most similar to a Bo Nix was Dillon Gabriel. If you had to clone Bo Nix, you get Dillon Gabriel. Outside of the size and the height, he's the next best thing to run the same exact playbook that Will Stein's going to run there at Oregon. Evan Stewart brings the physicality to Oregon that they haven't seen in a receiver since Dan Lanning has been there. He's had speedsters in Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin. All we talk about with these guys is they're track stars, right? Evan Stewart is a totally different breed of wide receiver. He reminds you of a Keon Coleman type of guy that's going to come there. That's going to be very good for them going into the Big Ten, where they're going to have very physical corners, or physical corners there. Also, you're going to pair him up with the 1K receiver in Tez Johnson, who was a big security blanket for Bo Nix last year, and throughout the year proved that he was probably better than Troy Franklin the whole season. Troy Freeland had a 10% drop rate. Then you get over to the running backs, James Jordan, Noah Whittington. This is going to be the running back 1-2 punch that the country, they're going to put everybody on notice. I'm just letting everybody know right now. They're going to come out of nowhere. And if you've seen them play last year, James Jordan was quick. He was fast. He was good in the red zone. He was great in 2023. The only reason he wasn't the starter is because Bucky Irvin was there. I'm just being honest with you. And then also, I mentioned this before, Dan Lannon's recruiting class is going to come on and put a stamp into one of the bigger names that he got, and there's a big player fit for him on the edge. It's going to be Mateo Uiagalelei, the brother of DJ Uiagalelei.
Yeah.
So
the very same.
So they're going to be all right. I mean, if you look at what they replaced and who's coming in to replace those guys, I would have loved to see what Bo Nix would have did with an Evan Stewart. I'm just letting you know right now. Like I would have loved to see that because he just brings a different,
that would have been nasty work.
A whole different dynamic to them. Now, if I was to get over to Ohio State, don't need to harp on them for a while. The Ohio State is the no mystery team in this year. What I mean by that is like everybody knows they're going to be ready to punch people in the mouth. There's no mystery to what they're going to be about this year. They're bringing in the two biggest transfers in the country. Caleb Downs, by far, was maybe the number one. Would y'all say he was the number one defensive player in the transfer portal? He had to have been.
Defensive,
yes.
Yeah.
I would say he's better than Walter Nolan, and I think Walter Nolan was the top guy before Downs entered.
And then
I would definitely say Caleb Downs leaving was I would say that it was the biggest impact for any team, and unfortunately had to just be Alabama.
And Quinshon Judkins was up there as the close to the number one offensive target in the league, and I got both of them on the same team. This team to me, I don't know if it's with you guys. This team to me looks like this was the team that was supposed to beat the 2023 Michigan Wolverines. Like it's almost like they reloaded to be like, if we got to play the Michigan Wolverines from 2023, we might be able to get them.
This is the one where they look at it and go, man, we were really lacking at quarterback because we were there. We were so close. It wasn't until Kyle McCord threw that interception on that last drive, and he threw another interception, or he had 2 total interceptions and all that stuff. And they're like, man,
yeah, bolster
up the quarterback room, get Will Howard, let's beef up on some defense. We're good.
Yeah. The one thing that Michigan struggled with last year was a dynamic safety. If you had a dynamic safety in a really good running game, it was hard pressed to say that you couldn't have beat them. And that's what people weren't doing. And that's why it would have been so interesting to see some of the other teams that were in the college football playoff last year, if they were to play, like the Texas of the world. Like, what would the Longhorns would have looked like against Michigan? Guess we'll never freaking know now, but, they got to go through Ohio State this year. We also talked about the impact of somebody like Will Howard, the quarterback that's coming over from Kansas State. To me, and don't take this too highly, I'm just saying this, and if you watched him play it against Texas, I always go to that game. He gives you what that Tim Tebow type of player can give you. He can improvise, and he's got a ton of guts, man. Like, he's going to give you everything that he's got every single Saturday. He's not great at one thing as a quarterback, but he's really good at creating something out of nothing. And I think that's what Kyle McCord was not giving them last year. He was very vanilla on what he did, but I think he's the best of, if you were to put Kyle McCord and Devin Brown together, you might get like a Will Howard type of guy. Some of the biggest question marks for me, though, is G. Scott Jr. filling in for Cade Stover. I don't know how that's going to work, and I don't know if, go back and watch our film study on Cade Stover. The dude he was up there as one of the best blockers in college football. I mean, he was definitely the closest next to Brock Bowers for me, but then also the physicality they gave you in the receiving game. Yeah. And then you go ahead and they get Will Kaczmarek from Ohio. He only had 243 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, but can he increase on those totals, and will, kind of he emerge over G. Scott Jr.? I don't know. But that's the biggest question mark. But of course, they got Emeka Egbuka, a wide receiver. Do we even need to mention that dude? No, we don't. We know what he's about. But the question marks.
Wide receiver room.
Well, the question marks are behind those three superstars. Well, the potential superstars, right? Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. Can they be? Yeah. Can they be great? Man, that's a big shoes to fill at Ohio State. We know what 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘲𝘀𝘀 is, but I would have liked to see if Julian Fleming would have stayed his last year at Ohio State. I would feel a lot more better about that wide receiver room, but I know the pedigree of what they bring over. And I think kind of an overlooked transfer in the transfer portal was Seth McLaughlin out of Alabama. He's going to be their center. He's going to be able to anchor them this year. He's going to bring the SEC pedigree. He's going to, he's going to be great for what TreVeyon Henderson and 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝘀 are kind of similar in the way that they, that they run the ball. Like they're two physical guys, like to run up the middle of the field. And it's going to be great for them. I think they're monstrous. And then the X factor out of every single team is having Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator. Because I'm telling you right now,
especially with that running back room.
That's what I'm saying. TreVeyon Henderson and 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝘀 are going to be what we thought Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen were going to be last year.
Yep. I was about to say they're probably, I don't even think it's a probably. I feel like it's a clear cut. That is the best running back duo in college football.
I'm going to tell you right now, if Chip Kelly's not getting the best out of one of them, they're going to hit the bench and the next guy is going to step in because he's not going to have a bad running game. It's not going to be what you saw at Penn State. Like, and Nick and Kaytron were great, but when we were projecting them, we were thinking they were going to have 1,200 yards apiece. That's what we thought, how monsters that they were going to be, and they weren't. Defensively, no one can doubt what Jim Knowles is about. Coming over from Oklahoma State and what he's done in the last couple of years with Ohio State has been, crazy. They do get two additions in the transfer portal. Well, we talked about them, Caleb Downs, and then also another safety, Keenan Nelson Jr. And it just tells me, if those are the only two guys that you went in and you got them at the same position and you understand your weakness already, Jim Knowles might be turning them up to 1,000 this year. And he trusts his guys. He trusts the next man up mentality. And I like that out of him. You fill in where you need to fill in, which was a huge spot for Caleb Downs to come in and fill in. But also you trust Jack Sawyer is still there. JT Tuimoloau, he's still there on the edge. That's two of the best edge rushers in the country. They're going to be crazy up front. They did lose Mike Hall Jr. to the draft. So they got Tyleik Williams. He's going to be there. He's going to show out. I think we liked him so much on film that I think he's just going to fill in place. And then, you talk about them in special teams. They're going to be pretty good. They're going to have a lot of speed on special teams. So all around, the team is going to be good. Now, here's, a lot of people are going to ask, well, how did Ohio State make it to number 5? Here's my explanation for that. I don't have them in my Big Ten championship. Everybody knows I have Oregon and Iowa in my Big Ten championship. Iowa still ranked lower than them in my 12-team playoff. But I believe they're going to lose close to Oregon, at Oregon, and I have them losing to Nebraska, which will sideline them until they beat Michigan later on in the season. Because I think Michigan's going to hover somewhere in like the top 15. And that'll catapult them up because they'll have better.
It's probably going to be like how it usually is of the game between Ohio State and Michigan. One of these teams will go to the playoffs, the other will not. Back when it was the 4 team, it was always like that had so much major implications because both of them were either 2 or 3, or both of them were always ranked 1 through 4, and it's like loser of this pretty much is out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably like if Michigan were to win. If you have Ohio State as a 2 loss, they're probably hovering around somewhere like 8 through 12, and if they lose, they're out and Michigan's in because it's like, well, Michigan just beat Ohio State. How can you keep Ohio State in at 3 losses, but Michigan, who we'll say have 2 and has the win over Ohio State?
Well, here's the thing: people can't separate in their mind, especially like new watchers to college football these last several years that we've had a 14 playoff.
Yeah.
AP and CFP are 2 totally different things when they kick in.
Completely different.
They restructured the whole top 25. Like, they don't even worry about, like, Associated Press has whatever you thought that they were going to do, the CFP comes in and they mix everything up and they really put their feelings towards this. Because you can't tell me in the room, even if they lose against Nebraska, let's say Nebraska is an 8-win team. People are going to be like, all right, Nebraska's better than what we thought. Matt Rule is there, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we'll knock Ohio State down. But as soon as they play it's a rival game, former national champions, and they're going to be a 2-loss team at the end of the year. It's going to catapult them to 5. I can just see that happening because you're going to look at those 2 losses, and they're going to be close losses. And they're going to consider that. They're going to be like, well, they could have beat Oregon if it was this. They could have beat Nebraska if it was that. And I think that's what's going to catapult them back to number 5. And then they're just going to win out from there. And with that being said, as you guys have guessed it, I have Ohio State as my champion this year. As much as it pains me and as much as I want to see Dillon Gabriel get a national championship, I think that this game is going to be fun to watch. I think Dan Lannon is going to have his head down at the end of this game, and he's going to be disappointed in the performance that they're going to put out there because he could have probably got more by the talent that he's had there. But I'm going to tell you right now, Oregon's going to be a beast next year with Dante Moore under center. That his next recruiting class is going to come in. People are going to want to go to the transfer portal now because they have the stature that Oregon can be a national championship caliber team again. And that's the biggest recruiting monster that you can have in the country, is being that close to a national championship and having a really good coach. So even though they might lose this year, the Big Ten guys they're gonna love this. And I get it. I know I see you guys in the comments talking about Ryan Day, but people don't understand the impact that like Chip Kelly's going to have on that team.
Yeah.
You have a competent offensive coordinator. This is not Brian Hartline calling plays. This is not Brian Hartline coordinating an offense. He's there to strictly recruit and get weapons in now.
Yep. I was about to say that. He is there to just give you all the 5-star wide receivers.
Yeah.
That's it.
I just don't think Georgia has the depth this year to make it that deep. And I hate to say that. I think they're going to smack people in the mouth all season until they get to this point. And it's just, I think they're going to run out of gas. And it's nothing against Kirby. It's just, think about it. Yeah,
no, it's everything against Kirby. That guy, no, I'm kidding.
No, I like Kirby. I like him more than Ryan Day. I mean, it's going to pay me to see Ryan Day win a national championship.
That's a low bar, but yes.
But we'll get into the Ryan Day thing later because I'm going to rip him a new one. But this is the year he's got to do it to change the trajectory because right now the numbers are against Ryan Day, like heavy. So I don't know. I don't know if you guys agree with this or disagree, but I think it goes beyond on paper on this one, brother. Like y'all can say what y'all want in the comments, but these are the two best teams that are going to be at the end of the year.
I mean, it's definitely possible. We've been saying since Will Howard got to Ohio State, even before he was named the starter, that it is a high potential of Ohio State and Oregon facing each other 3 times this year.
You know what this reminds me of? When Matt Stafford went to the Rams.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he's Matt Stafford, but I'm that confident. That I don't think Will Howard is
going to Ohio State, or
no, I'm that confident that they're going to win the national championship, and he's going to be the reason, one of the reasons why.
With confidence, yeah. Okay.
Nah, bro, like Will Howard is no joke, bro.
no, I know he's not, and I am going to be a little bit curious to see if they're going to, and by that I mean Chip Kelly is going to use Will Howard a bit more in the run game because he, mainly just if he needed to extend a play or if the pocket was collapsing. But like against Oklahoma State this past year, he had over 100 rushing yards. So it's like we know the dude can run if needed, or if called upon. It could see if he's also going to be added to that rushing attack, along with Quinchon and Henderson.
I never knew so many people hated Ohio State like that. Oh, it's so crazy to me. But I mean, I get people don't like Ryan Day, but I never felt like Ohio State was like some obnoxious team every single year. I just felt like they were just a really good program that always put it together. Like, I don't know. Out of all the schools, you got to give them credit too, because out of all the schools that they have in Ohio, which Ohio has some of the most, outside of Texas, they have the most FBS level schools in their state. You got to recruit against all of them, regardless if they're in the MAC or not. Like, There's a lot of people's families that have gone to those schools where they're gonna, oh, your dad went here. Let me pull you over here. Oh, but I got I got an offer from Ohio State. Nah, come over here.
Nah, no, you know.
How many people get pulled like that? You just never know. All right, Sora. Enough of me yapping.
Hold up, because mine. All right. I don't know what's going on with my camera, but yeah. So, Torque, you were somewhat close. I definitely have Alabama in here. I'm just gonna kind of, because Oregon was already talked about a lot.
So the number 1 and number 2 teams on your bracket going there. Ooh.
So Oregon was kind of already talked about a lot. They only had 9 incoming transfers, but with just 9 transfers, they ranked 4th in the nation. They added the number 3, number 6, number 18, and number 53 players. Those guys being Evan Stewart, the number 1 wide receiver in the class, Dante Moore, Jamari Caldwell, and of course Dylan Gabriel being, 4 of the top ranked of the list. I mean, again, pretty much trying to think of what else I can add that hasn't already been said about. Or
I'm sorry.
Like, yeah. No, I was just like, yeah, I can't.
But that's why we're a team. That's why we're a team. You could just say Dante said it all and move over to Alabama.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, pretty much just to reiterate. I mean, yeah, pretty much just to kind of give the quick, short summary of all that is, only 9 transfers. Yes, they lost, Tez Johnson, Kyrie Jackson, Bo Nix, which rest in peace, Bo Nix. They lost all those guys, but they reloaded pretty well. And you just look at the losses that they faced last year against Washington. One of them was just a bad decision to punt, which Dan Lanning's not going to make a mistake again. And then the second time, Washington was just the better team. I mean, even then it was close. It wasn't until the 4th quarter, really, when Washington was starting to able to pull, started pulling away. You got Evan Stewart, a physical receiver to go alongside, with your track stars of Tez Johnson. So it's going to be interesting. But, now on to Alabama, which I've been talking about so many times. So as, we mentioned, yes, they lost quite a lot of guys. They did lose. Why I cannot find it. Obviously, the 2 positions that hit the hardest were wide receiver. They lost Isaiah Bond to Texas, Malik Benson. He's at Florida State. Corey Brooks, Shaz Preston, a bunch of other guys that were kind of depth. Defensive back, obviously Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs and Trey Amos were probably the biggest hit in the transfer portal. Obviously, you've got Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. Those guys went to the draft. But even with all those losses between the winter and the spring portal, 39 scholarships and walk-on, they transferred out of the program. Despite all that loss, though, Kalen DeBoer, in just this short offseason that he had with Bama, brought in 14 transfers, and they still had the 2nd-ranked recruiting class, even, after Nick Saban retired. So even, yes, they lost some recruits.
Thank you, Nick.
I know, right? Yes, some of them still left after Nick Saban retired, but they kept a majority of them and were able to keep the 2nd-ranked
bless you, Nick.
recruiting classes. So, you kind of look at the returning starters, and 2 of the big ones are going to be Kobe Prentice. He was a true freshman last year, 31 catches, 337 yards. Role kind of diminished a bit because Alabama went more of the 2 tight end set. Only 18 catches, but again, you had those 314 yards. The rest of them were kind of with rushing. Dude is now thrusted into the top of the depth chart. Speedy guy, track star, and then you're going to look at Kendrick Law, who's a junior, and this dude kind of played everywhere. He was wide receiver, tight end, running back, a lot of jet motions. I mean, this dude was kind of we'll say Deebo Samuel, just for lack of a better term, they just put him wherever he was needed, wherever a spot was needed for whatever, package. And then a guy brought in from Washington was Jeremy Bernard, who was a wide receiver 4 on a stacked Washington team, still racked up 419 receiving yards, 43 rushing yards. Again, another kind of the gadget player, similar to what Kendrick Law was. I keep wanting to say Kendrick Lamar. Who Kendrick Law was. You know, big, fast, dangerous dude after the catch. So, yes, it's going to be a lot of somewhat newer faces. These receivers are going to be in bigger roles, but you have to look at what Jamarcus Shepard and Kalen DeBoer did. Jamarcus Shepard was the wide receiver coach for Washington, now brought on to Bama. And his top 3 wide receivers were all drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. You had Rome Odunze, top 10 pick. You had Jalen Polk, who went 54 to the Patriots. And then Jalen McMillan, who went 92 to the Bears.
Buccaneers.
So all what? Or sorry, Buccaneers. Yeah, I don't know why I said Bear. Wrong B.
My B.
So, you know, you had, you know, all 3 of those guys went in the top 3 rounds. So, you know that the wide receivers are in good hands there at Bama. And again, you look at exactly what Kalen did with Michael Penix, who, you know, transferred from India, who, you know, we kind of all sat up here and we were like, he might be good. I don't think he's going to be that great. Little did we know that the dude was going to end up being a Heisman runner in his last season at Washington, and also in the national championship.
4,900 yards passing last year. Boy was no joke.
And that's also just another thing. These guys do have playoff experience, and I think keeping Jalen Milroe and, you know, other players that stayed, especially after not how badly they lost to Michigan, because it was just it was still a 1 possession and they almost came back, but just the way they lost on a broken play on 4th and goal, just with a bad snap. So he had no choice but to, you know, quickly scoop it up and try to run it into the end zone, and got stuffed immediately. I mean, that's a sour note to go off of. So, you know, you can just kind of look at all that stuff, how the season ended, how Kalen DeBoer and all those guys over at Washington ended. These are guys that have experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the wide receiver room is going to be as bad. Again, I think the biggest problem is going to be, you know, replacing what Caleb Down and Trey Amos did, which we'll have to see exactly what that looks like. But some of the guys that they got, you know, Damani Jackson out of USC, King Mack out of Penn State, Keon Sabb out of Michigan, Cameron Howard, Charlotte, Deshaun Jones, Wake Forest. We kind of talked about those guys a little bit before, but, you know, Damani Jackson, 5-star. He's probably going to be, you know, #1 CB, kind of where Terry and Arnold was. Deshaun Jones might be where Kool-Aid McKinstry was. So it's just going to be interesting. We'll see what Keon Sabb does, you know, the Michigan transfer at safety. So it's just going to be a lot of new faces. But I think these are guys that came from Power 5 schools, came from schools that were previously in the playoffs. Some of them playoff winners. So I think you've still kind of got that mentality of the playoffs. I think that's going to help push it. For Alabama, for the track that they had, because I just completely forgot to say the track that they went on. Alabama as the 2 seed, they had the bye week. They beat #7 Ole Miss. They then go on to beat #3 Clemson, and then they're facing off in the championship against #1 Oregon. Oregon, their path to the playoffs, #1, so they had a bye week. Then they beat #8 Kansas State.
Mm-hmm.
They beat #5 Ohio State to go into the playoffs to face Alabama. And, you know, despite everything that I just said about Alabama, much like Dante, or not much like Dante, sorry, I have Oregon winning this. Again, pretty much kind of like what everything with Dante said. I just think
Duckies.
I think,
quack, quack.
You know, you've got 2 Heisman. I've mentioned before I have Jalen Milroe as the Heisman winner, and then, you know, Dylan Gabriel as the runner-up. So you've got 2 elite quarterbacks facing off in this. I just think I think Oregon just has more defensive weapons to kind of slow down Jalen Milroe, and I think their firepower on offense is just too much with, you know, the speed star of Tez Walker, the physical bodied receiver of Evan Stewart. You look at the run game, I think it might be a bit too much for Alabama to handle.
Khalid, can Evan Stewart be George Pickens?
He'll play like it, but I mean, he's not a big dude. Like, like that's the one thing that, you know, kind of that stuck out to me from watching him play was like he doesn't look very big on the field. Like he's 6 foot 175, like 180. But he plays
bigger.
He does. And that's the thing is he plays mean. He plays aggressive. Like, I mean, I know that was one of the concerns about Devontae Smith coming out of college was, you know, frame versus how does he play? And he plays, I mean, even Xavier Worthy too, right? Xavier Worthy will stiff arm you and try to run you over, right? Lower shoulder. And Evan Stewart's that same kind of guy, right? He may not be the biggest, but he's a refined route runner and he plays mean. So, you know, he might not be able to physically do some of the same things, but in his head he can, and that enables him a lot more than most guys.
And that is something as well that is, you know, interesting to note with Evan Stewart is, yeah, he's not the biggest guy, but dude doesn't play like he's 6'1". Dude plays like he's an AJ Brown type of guy or a DK Metcalf. And you just look at him and you go, you're not built for that. You shouldn't be able to do this, but somehow you are. So just keep it up, you know?
Oh, he's built for it. It's just people don't know yet.
I think the Devontae Smith comparison's kind of spot on. It's just like, this is an anomaly. You should be able to do this, but yet here you are, so keep it up.
Yeah.
And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you're always notified.
All right, well, the 12 Oh my god. That's what I'm saying. This one, like, bro, you just gotta just be you, bro. Just be you, bro.